What is the true measure of a person's worth? Is it the cut of their suit, the balance in their bank account, or the title on their business card? Or is it something quieter, something hidden, something you can only see in a moment of crisis when the masks fall away? We are taught to look for value in the loud and the shiny, to admire the fortress of success from a distance. But what if the greatest treasure, the most profound strength, is found in the most overlooked places, in the heart of someone everyone else has trained themselves not to see? This is a story about a woman who was invisible, and the powerful man who was forced to truly open his eyes for the first time. It's a story about what happens when a single act of kindness in a world of indifference sends a ripple that changes everything. Elara moved through the gilded dining room of Aura, like a ghost. She was a whisper of black and white, her worn but impeccably clean uniform a stark contrast to the glittering jewels and bespoke suits of the clientele she served. For 2 years, she had perfected the art of invisibility. It was a survival skill. The less she was noticed, the less likely she was to incur the wrath of her manager, Marcus, a man whose smile was as thin and sharp as a shard of glass. Her movements were fluid and efficient, her face a polite, neutral mask that betrayed none of the exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. Every perfectly plated dish she carried, every empty wine glass she cleared, was one small step toward paying down the mountain of medical debt her mother's long illness had left behind. Her mother, a librarian who believed in the power of stories and the goodness of people, had been Elara's entire world. Now, all that was left were the memories, the grief, and the crushing weight of bills that arrived like clockwork insults to her memory. Elara's hidden gift was a secret she kept locked away, a talent that had no place in this world of superficial transactions. She had a mind like a steel trap, a memory so vivid and precise it was almost photographic. She could recall the exact shade of a woman's lipstick from a week ago, the subtle tells in a man's posture when he was lying about enjoying his meal, the intricate patterns of conversation that flowed and eddied around her. She saw the world in details others missed, a symphony of minutiae that told the real stories beneath the polished veneer. She knew which couples were genuinely in love and which were performing for an audience. She knew which business deals were being celebrated and which were falling apart in hushed, desperate tones. But here, at Aura, her perception was worthless. She was just a pair of hands. Tonight the restaurant was buzzing with its usual self-important energy. The air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and expensive perfume. Elara glided between tables, refilling water glasses, her ears catching snippets of conversation about stock markets, gallery openings, and summering in the Hamptons. She felt a familiar pang of otherness, the feeling of being a spectator in a world she could serve but never join. The patrons saw her as part of the decor, a functioning piece of the restaurant's machinery. They looked through her, their eyes gliding past to land on someone they deemed more important. And in that moment, she believed them. She felt small, insignificant, her dreams and intellect shrinking under the weight of their collective indifference. Her worn-out, sensible shoes, the soles carefully repaired with glue, felt 1,000 miles away from the red-soled heels and gleaming Italian leather that clicked and tapped across the marble floor. She was a footnote in their glamorous lives, and that was all she thought she would ever be. An elderly woman entered the restaurant, her presence a quiet disruption to the carefully curated ambience. She wasn't dressed in designer labels. Her coat was simple, her hair a little windswept, and she carried a worn leather handbag instead of the latest trend. She looked around, not with the entitled air of the usual clientele, but with a gentle curiosity. Marcus, the manager, intercepted her near the hostess stand, his posture stiffening with disapproval. His eyes did a quick, dismissive scan of her attire. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension, implying she had clearly wandered into the wrong establishment. "I'm supposed to be meeting my son," the woman said, her voice soft but clear. "His name is Julian." Marcus's expression didn't soften. "We have no reservation under that name. Perhaps you're mistaken." Before the woman could reply, he gestured vaguely toward the bar. "You can wait there. If he arrives—" He turned away without another word, already focused on a wealthier-looking couple who had just walked in. Elara watched the exchange from across the room, a familiar knot of anger tightening in her stomach. She saw the brief flash of hurt in the old woman's eyes before it was replaced by a resigned patience. Elara made a point to bring her a glass of water at the bar, offering a small, genuine smile. "He'll be here soon, I'm sure," she said quietly. The woman's eyes, a startlingly bright blue, met hers. "Thank you, dear. That's very kind." A few minutes later, a table opened up, and the hostess, following Marcus's lead, seated the woman at a small, undesirable table near the noisy kitchen doors. Elara became her server by default, ensuring her water was always full and speaking to her with the respect Marcus had denied her. It was as the woman was taking a bite of her bread that it happened. A sudden, violent cough. Her hands flew to her throat, her eyes wide with panic. The color drained from her face. A few people at nearby tables glanced over, annoyed by the commotion. Someone muttered, "For heaven's sake!" No one moved to help. Marcus, standing near the front, merely scowled, irritated by the disruption to his perfect dining room. But Elara saw the universal language of fear in the woman's eyes. She didn't hesitate. She dropped the tray of glasses she was holding, the sound shattering the restaurant's hum. In 3 quick strides, she was behind the woman's chair. "I can help you," she said, her voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She wrapped her arms around the woman's waist, made a fist, and performed the Heimlich maneuver with a practiced efficiency she hadn't used since a first aid course years ago. On the 3rd sharp thrust, the piece of food dislodged. The woman gasped, drawing in a ragged, desperate breath. She slumped forward, trembling, as Elara gently supported her, whispering, "It's okay. You're okay. Just breathe." The immediate crisis was over, but Elara's was just beginning. The entire restaurant was now staring. A splash of red wine from a toppled glass had stained the front of her white shirt. "What is the meaning of this?" Marcus hissed, rushing over. His face was a mask of fury. "You've made a scene! You broke glassware! And you've assaulted a customer!" A man at a nearby table laughed cruelly. "Some dinner and a show," his companion chimed in. "Probably just wanted a bigger tip." The mockery washed over Elara, hot and humiliating. She ignored them, her focus solely on the shaken woman, who was now looking at her with profound gratitude. "Thank you," she rasped, her hand finding Elara's. "You saved my life." Elara simply squeezed her hand back, her own heart still pounding. The value of a life, she thought, was worth more than all the broken glass and spilled wine in the world. But as she looked at the sea of disdainful, judgmental faces, she knew she was utterly alone in that belief. The heavy glass doors of Aura swung open, and a man stepped inside. A palpable chill swept through the room, silencing the whispers and snickers in an instant. It wasn't just his presence, which was formidable, but the aura of absolute, unassailable power that radiated from him. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit that probably cost more than Elara made in 6 months. His face was sharp, intelligent, and etched with a severity that suggested he did not suffer fools. His eyes, the same startling bright blue as the old woman's, swept across the room with a cold, analytical precision. This was Julian Vance, the reclusive, genius CEO of Vance Industries, a global technology empire he had built from the ground up. He was a legend in the business world, known for his ruthless efficiency and his almost complete withdrawal from public life. His gaze landed on the scene by the kitchen doors, his mother, pale and trembling, the sneering manager, Marcus, and a young waitress with a large red wine stain on her uniform, her hand still resting protectively on his mother's shoulder. Julian's face remained an unreadable mask of stone, but inside, a storm was brewing. He saw everything in a single, lightning-fast assessment. He saw the broken glass on the floor. He saw the disdain on the faces of the nearby patrons. He saw the sycophantic terror that instantly replaced the fury on Marcus's face as the manager recognized him. And he saw the waitress. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes, a stark contrast to the performative panic that now surrounded them. He saw the defiant set of her jaw as she stood her ground, unintimidated by the hostile glares. He saw integrity. It was a quality he rarely encountered in his world of calculated alliances and transactional relationships. It was a quality he valued above all others, a core principle his father had instilled in him before his death, a principle Julian feared he was losing touch with in his relentless pursuit of success. "Mother," he said, his voice low and calm, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. "Are you all right?" Eleanor Vance looked up, relief flooding her features. "Julian! I'm fine, darling. Thanks to this young lady." She gestured to Alara. Julian's gaze shifted to Alara, and for the first time, she felt truly seen. His eyes weren't looking through her, they were studying her, assessing her with an unnerving intensity. She felt a blush creep up her neck, suddenly conscious of her stained uniform and disheveled appearance. She quickly pulled her hand back from his mother's shoulder. Marcus practically scrambled over, his face a grotesque mask of fawning apology. "Mr. Vance! 1,000 apologies. There was a slight disturbance. This clumsy employee," he shot a venomous glare at Alara, "caused a scene and upset your mother. She is being dealt with, I assure you. Your meal, of course, will be on the house. Everything will be taken care of." Julian didn't even look at him. His focus remained on Alara. He noted the way she didn't flinch under Marcus's accusation, the way her spine remained straight. He saw that she was not ashamed of her actions, only of the unwanted attention. He then looked at his mother, who was now shaking her head, a flicker of anger in her tired eyes. "That's not what happened, Julian," she said firmly. "He's lying." "This young woman saved me." Julian's gaze moved back to Marcus, and the temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. In that moment, Julian Vance wasn't just a son concerned for his mother. He was the apex predator of the corporate world, and he had just identified a threat to something he held dear. He had come here tonight out of obligation, another dinner to be checked off his schedule, but he had stumbled into something far more significant. He had found a rare thing, a person of character. "Dealt with?" Julian Vance repeated the words slowly, his voice dangerously soft. He finally turned his gaze upon Marcus, and the manager physically recoiled as if struck. "Tell me, what exactly did my mother's savior do that requires her to be dealt with?" Marcus began to stammer, his carefully constructed composure crumbling under the weight of Julian's icy stare. "Well, she overreacted, sir. Caused a panic. Broke property. It was highly unprofessional. We have standards at Aura." Julian's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth, no humor. It was a chilling, predatory expression. "You have standards," he mused, his eyes sweeping over the gawking patrons. "And what are those standards? To let a woman choke for fear of disturbing the ambience? To value glassware over a human life?" He took a step closer to Marcus, who looked as if he might faint. "My mother is the most important person in the world to me." "And your standards deemed her unworthy of a proper table and left her to die while your staff stood by. But this waitress, this unprofessional employee, she saw a person in need and acted. So, tell me again about your standards." The public humiliation was absolute. Marcus's face cycled through shades of red and white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Julian dismissed him with a flick of his eyes and turned his full attention to Alara. The intensity of his focus was like a physical force. "I am in your debt," he said, the words formal but laced with an undeniable sincerity. Alara, who had been a silent observer to the manager's dressing down, finally found her voice. "It was nothing, sir. I just did what anyone should have done, but they didn't, did they?" Julian countered, his gaze sharp. No one else moved. He looked at the wine stain on her shirt. "He said you would be dealt with. Does that mean you're fired?" The reality of her situation crashed back in on Alara. The broken glasses, the scene, Marcus's fury. Of course she was fired. I expect so," she admitted, her shoulders slumping slightly. She had saved a life, but she was about to lose her livelihood. The crushing weight of her mother's debt felt heavier than ever. Good, Julian said, the single word hanging in the air. Elara looked up, confused. He pulled a sleek, minimalist business card from his jacket pocket. It was made of a heavy, metallic stock, bearing only a name, Julian Vance, and a private phone number. Call this number tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, he instructed, holding it out to her. I have a proposition for you. Elara stared at the card, then at his face, her mind reeling. A proposition? I don't understand. I'm a waitress, you are a waitress, he corrected her. What I saw tonight was not a waitress. I saw composure under extreme pressure. I saw decisive action in the face of chaos. I saw integrity when it was scorned. These are qualities I find exceedingly rare and infinitely more valuable than a university degree or a polished resume. I'm offering you an opportunity, a test. Whether you pass it is up to you. He placed the card in her hand, his fingers briefly brushing against hers. A jolt, small but unmistakable, passed between them. He then turned to his mother, his expression softening as he helped her to her feet. Let's go home, Mother. As he guided his mother toward the door, he paused and looked back, not at Elara, but at the stunned and silent room. As for Aura, he announced, his voice ringing with cold authority, consider my corporate and all personal accounts with this establishment permanently closed. With that, he was gone, leaving behind a shattered dining room, a ruined manager, and a young woman holding a small metal card that felt like both a lifeline and a terrifying leap into the unknown. The next morning, Elara sat on the edge of her lumpy mattress in her tiny, sparsely furnished apartment, the metal business card feeling cold and heavy in her trembling hand. The room was filled with the gray light of dawn, illuminating the worn-out furniture and the stack of threatening red-lettered bills on her small desk. For hours she had debated. Was it a prank? A gesture of pity? Was this man, this titan of industry, truly offering her a chance? Fear warred with a desperate flicker of hope. Her life was a dead end of exhaustion and debt. What did she have to lose? Her job at Aura was certainly gone. Taking a deep breath, she looked at the clock. It was 8:59 a.m., and with a surge of resolve, she dialed the number. It was answered on the first ring. A crisp, professional voice said simply, Vance. This is Elara, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I was told to call at 9, we've been expecting you, the voice replied, without a hint of surprise. A car will be at your address in 30 minutes. The line went dead. 30 minutes later, a sleek black car, the kind she had only seen in movies, was waiting outside her rundown apartment building. The journey to the city center was a blur. She felt as though she had stepped into an alternate reality. The Vance Industries Tower was a monument of glass and steel that pierced the clouds, a symbol of unimaginable power and wealth. The lobby was a cavernous space of white marble and minimalist art, hushed and intimidating. Her name was already with the security desk, and she was guided to a private elevator that shot upwards with silent, breathtaking speed. The doors opened directly into a corner office that seemed to be suspended in the sky, with panoramic windows offering a godlike view of the city below. Julian Vance stood looking out one of the windows, his back to her. A second man, older, with kind eyes but a wary expression, stood beside a large mahogany desk. Elara, thank you for coming, Julian said, turning to face her. This is David Chin, my chief counsel and oldest friend. David gave her a polite but skeptical nod. His look was one she recognized. It was the look of someone trying to solve a puzzle. He was wondering what she, a waitress in a simple dress, was doing in this corporate sanctum. David is concerned, Julian continued, a hint of amusement in his voice. He thinks my hiring practices have become unconventional. David cleared his throat. Julian, with respect, we have protocols. We have an entire HR department dedicated to vetting candidates for sensitive positions. And would your protocols have identified the core qualities I witnessed last night? Julian countered, his gaze unwavering. He gestured for Elara to sit. David, she's not here for a conventional position. She's here for a test. Julian walked over to the desk and picked up a thick, black data drive. He placed it on the polished surface in front of Ilara. This is Project Chimera, he said, his tone shifting, becoming all business. It was supposed to be our company's next great leap in predictive analytics. We poured 2 years and nearly $1 billion into it. 6 weeks ago, it failed. Catastrophically. The system crashed, the data corrupted, and the entire project was scrapped. Our top analysts, the best minds from MIT and Stanford that your protocols found, David, spent a month trying to figure out why. They found nothing. They called the data random noise, an unsolvable cascade failure. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. I don't believe in random noise. I believe everything has a pattern. Your test, Ilara, is to look at what they looked at and see what they missed. On this drive is every line of code, every data log, every memo associated with Project Chimera. You will be given an office, a computer, and complete access. Find the pattern. Find the flaw. David looked at Julian as if he'd lost his mind. Julian, that's impossible. A team of experts couldn't do it. They were looking for a technical error. Julian said, his eyes still on Ilara. I want you to look for a human one. A story? A mistake born from arrogance, or greed, or fear. You see things other people don't notice. I'm betting that talent isn't limited to a restaurant. Ilara stared at the black drive. It was the most intimidating object she had ever seen. The weight of his expectation was immense, terrifying. But mixed with the fear was a thrill, a spark of life she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since her mother's death, someone was looking at her and seeing not a servant, not a debtor, not an invisible girl, but a person with a unique and valuable mind. Okay, she said, her voice soft but firm. I'll do it. Ilara was led to a small, sterile office, a glass box with the same stunning view as Julian's. It contained only a desk, a chair, and a powerful computer terminal. For the first hour, she just sat there, the sheer unreality of her situation threatening to overwhelm her. She, Ilara, who had spent the previous night clearing dirty plates, was now tasked with solving a billion-dollar corporate mystery. The data drive was a digital Pandora's box. When she finally plugged it in, the screen filled with an endless cascade of code, spreadsheets, internal chat logs, and algorithmic outputs. It was a tidal wave of information, chaotic and incomprehensible. It was exactly as Julian had described, random noise. For 2 days she felt like she was drowning. She read through the technical reports from the previous team of analysts, their conclusions all the same, a cascade failure of unknown origin. She tried to understand the complex coding languages, her head spinning with jargon. She felt the weight of David's skepticism from afar and the immensity of Julian's strange faith in her. She was on the verge of admitting defeat, of telling Julian he had made a terrible mistake. Then, late on the second night, surrounded by empty coffee cups, she remembered what he had said. Don't look for a technical error. Look for a human one. A story. She pushed the technical manuals aside. She stopped trying to be a coder or a data scientist. She started to be herself. She closed her eyes and thought about the dining room at Aura. She thought about how she could see the hidden stories there, the subtle tells, the repeated gestures, the patterns of behavior that betrayed the truth. She decided to look at the data not as a machine's output, but as a conversation. Her unique mind began to work its magic. She didn't just read the code, she absorbed it. Her eidetic memory, so useless for so long, began to map the vast landscape of information. She saw the project not as a single entity, but as the work of dozens of individuals. She started with the chat logs, reading the casual, day-to-day interactions between the programmers. She memorized their conversational tics, their inside jokes, their recurring complaints. Then she cross-referenced those logs with the timestamps on the code's submissions. A pattern began to emerge, faint at first, like a watermark on paper. There was one senior programmer, a man named Alan Ricard, who was consistently lauded as the project's superstar. His code was elegant, efficient. But Alara noticed something odd. In the chat logs, his tone was often dismissive, arrogant. He frequently belittled the work of a junior programmer named Ben. Digging deeper, she saw that Ben would often submit code modules, only for Alan to check in a corrected version hours later, taking credit for the fix. But Alara's memory saw something the others had missed. She compared Ben's original code with Alan's corrections. Alan wasn't just correcting Ben's work, he was introducing tiny, almost imperceptible flaws. They were minuscule, like single misplaced punctuation marks in a 1,000-page novel. On their own, they were harmless. But when compiled together over months, they created a hidden vulnerability. It was a language of sabotage, written in whispers of code. She found the heart of it in a single, overlooked memo from 6 months prior. Ben had flagged a potential architectural weakness. His warning was dismissed by Alan as the paranoid ramblings of an inexperienced coder. The project lead, trusting his superstar, had signed off on Alan's assessment. Ben had quit the company a week later. Alara followed the trail. She saw that Alan Ricard had left Vance Industries 2 months after Project Chimera's collapse. A quick search online revealed his new position: head of research and development at Vance's biggest corporate rival, a company that had just announced a new predictive analytics platform eerily similar to Chimera. The story was there. It wasn't a cascade failure. It was a deliberate, methodical assassination of a project from the inside. It was a story of arrogance, jealousy, and betrayal. Alara leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding with the thrill of discovery. She had seen the pattern in the noise. She had found the human story. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had her answer. While Alara was uncovering the truth buried in lines of code, Marcus, the disgraced manager of Aura, was nursing his wounded pride with a potent cocktail of resentment and venom. His public humiliation at the hands of Julian Vance had been swift and total. He had been fired the moment Julian and his mother left the restaurant. His name was now poison in the city's exclusive hospitality industry. In his mind, the architect of his downfall was not his own cruelty or incompetence, but the quiet, stained uniform waitress who had dared to be a hero. He became obsessed with the injustice of it all. How could she, a nobody, be elevated while he, a man who had dedicated his life to serving the elite, was cast aside? His envy curdled into a desire for revenge. He made a phone call. The recipient was a man he knew from years of discreetly passing on gossip about his wealthy patrons, a tabloid journalist named Sullivan who had a reputation for shredding reputations for the right price. "Sullivan," Marcus began, his voice slick with malice, "I have a story for you. A real Cinderella story, but with a much dirtier ending. It's about the city's most reclusive billionaire, Julian Vance." Sullivan's interest was immediately piqued. He listened as Marcus spun his tale, a masterful work of fiction woven from a few threads of truth. He painted Alara as a cunning, ambitious schemer. He claimed she had researched Julian Vance, knew his mother frequented the restaurant, and had staged the entire choking incident. "She's a classic gold digger," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. "She saw her chance and played the part of the damsel in distress's savior perfectly. And the old Ice King fell for it hook, line, and sinker. He fired me on the spot and gave her a cushy job at his company. She's probably picking out curtains for the penthouse as we speak." It was a salacious, ugly story, and Sullivan knew it would sell. 2 days later, as Alara was preparing her final report, the story broke. The headline was splashed across the front page of the city's most notorious tabloid. "Billionaire's new hero or a cunning gold digger? The waitress who cooked up a scheme to trap the Ice King." The article was brutal. It used Marcus's quotes, portraying Alara as a manipulative social climber. It included an unflattering photo of her taken outside her rundown apartment building, juxtaposed with a file photo of the gleaming Vance Tower. The implication was clear and vicious. The story spread like wildfire through the corporate world. Within Vance Industries, the whispers started immediately. The glass walls of Alara's office suddenly felt like they were part of a fishbowl. People would walk by, slow down, and stare. They saw not the brilliant analyst who had spent a week deciphering their company's greatest failure, but the girl from the tabloid headline. The skepticism Davidson had initially felt returned with a vengeance. He stormed into Julian's office, the tabloid clutched in his hand. "I told you this was a mistake, Julian," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "I told you we have protocols for a reason. The board is calling, the investors are spooked. They think you've been compromised, that this woman is taking advantage of you. The timing of this is a disaster. She's about to present her findings, and now her credibility is shot. You have to cut her loose." Now, Julian Vance stood by his window, his back to David, looking down at the city. He remained silent for a long moment. When he finally turned, his face was like granite, his blue eyes cold and hard. "Is that what you think, David?" he asked quietly. "After all our years together, do you really think I am so easily fooled? Do you think my judgment is so poor that I can't distinguish between a person of character and a common grifter? The world thinks it." David shot back, gesturing with the paper. "This is what they see." "I don't care what the world sees," Julian stated, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "I care about the truth. The board meeting will proceed as scheduled. Elara will give her presentation. And I expect you to be there." His tone left no room for argument. But as David left the office, a seed of doubt had been planted. Julian was a man who trusted data and logic above all else. For the first time, he was operating on something else entirely, a gut instinct, a faith in one person's character against a mountain of circumstantial slander. He knew that in the boardroom, both Elara and his own judgment would be on trial. The boardroom at Vance Industries was a place of immense power, a silent, wood-paneled arena where fortunes were made and careers were broken. The long, polished table reflected the grim faces of the board members, a collection of old money and ruthless corporate strategists. They held copies of the tabloid, their disapproval a tangible force in the room. Elara stood at the head of the table, a lone figure in a simple, borrowed blazer. She felt the full weight of their hostility, their judgment. They weren't looking at a colleague, they were looking at a headline, a scandal. Julian sat to her right, his face an unreadable mask, while David sat opposite, his expression tense and worried. The chairman, a stern man named Arthur Pennington, cleared his throat. "Ms. Elara," he began, barely bothering to hide his disdain. "Before we hear this presentation, the board has serious concerns about the context of your sudden employment. This article," he slid the paper across the table, "makes some very serious allegations. It suggests you are here under false pretenses." All eyes were on Elara. They expected her to stammer, to defend herself, to crumble. The room was silent, waiting for the kill. Elara took a quiet breath. She looked not at their accusatory faces, but at the data drive resting beside her laptop. She thought of her mother, who had taught her that the truth was its own defense. "Mr. Pennington," she said, her voice steady and clear, ringing with a quiet authority that surprised them all. "My personal character is not on the agenda today. The failure of Project Chimera is. The billion-dollar loss your company suffered is. I was asked to find a pattern in the noise. I have." She clicked a button on her laptop, and the large screen behind her came to life. "You were told Project Chimera failed due to a random cascade failure. You were told wrong." For the next 20 minutes, Elara held the room captive. She spoke without notes, her memory a flawless repository of the facts. She didn't just present data, she told a story. She walked them through the subtle acts of sabotage, displaying Ben's original code next to Alan Ricard's altered versions. She showed them the dismissed memo, the timeline of events, the digital breadcrumbs that Alan had tried so hard to erase. She moved with a confidence that came from absolute certainty. She was no longer the invisible waitress, she was a master of her craft, her mind a finely tuned instrument that had sliced through a web of deceit. "The failure wasn't random," she concluded, her eyes sweeping across the stunned faces of the board members. "It was deliberate, malicious, and it was executed from the inside by your top programmer, Alan Ricard, who then took the core concepts of your stolen project to your chief competitor, where he now works." She put up the final slide, a picture of Alan Ricard from his new company's website. The silence in the room was absolute. The board members stared at the screen, their skepticism replaced by a dawning horror. They hadn't just been wrong, they had been played for fools. Pennington was the first to speak, his voice hoarse. This is irrefutable." It was then that one of the more aggressive board members, a rival of Julian's, saw his chance to pivot. "Even if this is true," he sneered, "it doesn't change the optics of the situation, Julian. Your judgment in bringing this woman into the heart of our company during a crisis, based on a chance encounter in a restaurant, is reckless. The press will have a field day with this." Julian Vance finally moved. He rose slowly to his feet, his powerful frame commanding the room's attention. "Reckless?" he said, his voice dangerously low. "My father founded this company on one principle: that character is the ultimate currency. A principle some of you seem to have forgotten in your rush to read gossip rags." He looked directly at his rival. "My reckless judgment brought in the one person who could see the truth that our entire, highly paid, perfectly vetted team of experts missed. Her perception just saved this company from losing billions more in a lawsuit we would have otherwise lost, and has given us the ammunition to cripple our biggest competitor. She succeeded because she is not from our world. She has integrity. She has a mind that sees past the noise. Qualities that are in short supply in this room." He then turned his gaze to Alara, and for the first time in front of them all, his expression softened with undisguised admiration. "Alara is the single greatest asset this company has acquired in the last decade. And if anyone in this room has a problem with that, their resignation will be accepted, effective immediately." The challenge was laid down, cold and absolute. No one dared to meet his eyes. The trial was over. Alara had not only proven her theory, she had proven her worth. And Julian had proven his loyalty. The fallout was immediate and decisive. Armed with Alara's meticulously documented evidence, Vance Industries' legal team, led by a newly humbled and deeply impressed David Chin, launched a multi-pronged attack. They filed a massive lawsuit against their competitor for corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property. They pursued criminal charges against Alan Ricard, who was promptly arrested. The news of the sabotage, and Alara's role in uncovering it, became the real story, completely eclipsing the tabloid's fabricated nonsense. The journalist Sullivan was disgraced, and an internal investigation at Aura revealed Marcus had not only been the source but had a history of unprofessional conduct. He would never work in the city again. Alara's name, once smeared, was now mentioned with awe in the financial press. She was the Vance Whisperer, the woman with the golden gut who had solved the unsolvable problem. Within the company, the change was profound. The whispers of suspicion turned into murmurs of respect. Colleagues who had once looked through her now sought her opinion on complex problems. One afternoon, David Chin came to her office, holding 2 cups of coffee. He set one on her desk and looked at her with an expression of genuine remorse. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice sincere. "I misjudged you. I saw the headline, not the person. I let the noise cloud my judgment. What you did in that boardroom. It was brilliant. But more than that, it was brave. I was wrong." Alara offered him a small, forgiving smile. "You were being protective of your friend and your company. I understand, he's lucky to have you," David said quietly, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. "We all are." He left her office not just as a colleague, but as a staunch and loyal ally. Later that evening, Julian asked her to join him in his office. The city lights twinkled below them, a sea of diamonds scattered on black velvet. The mood was different now, the professional tension between them replaced by something softer, more personal. "They're offering to settle," Julian said, referring to their competitor. "For an amount that would have been unthinkable a week ago, You'll take it? Elara asked. No, he replied, turning from the window to face her. It's not about the money. It's about the principle. What Alan did was a betrayal of trust. We will see it through. He paused, his gaze searching her face. I never had a doubt, you know. Not for a moment, even with the article? With the board turning on you. Especially then, he said. The world is full of noise, Elara. Lies, rumors, half-truths. It's all designed to make you doubt what you know to be real. In that restaurant, I saw something real. I saw character. That's a data point that no tabloid can corrupt. He took a step closer, the space between them shrinking. My father built this company from nothing. He believed in people. He used to say, don't just look at what people do, look at why they do it. After he died, I got lost in the what, the profits, the expansion, the market share. I forgot about the why. I became isolated, surrounded by people who told me what I wanted to hear. I built walls of glass and steel around myself. His voice grew softer, filled with a vulnerability she had never heard before. You reminded me of the why. That single act of kindness to my mother, with no expectation of reward, was more powerful than any business deal I've ever made. You didn't just save my mother, Elara. In a way, you saved me. In that moment, he was no longer the Ice King, the formidable CEO. He was just Julian, a man burdened by legacy and loneliness, who had finally found someone who saw past the fortress to the man inside. Elara felt the last of her own walls crumbling, the fear and insecurity that had plagued her for years melting away under the warmth of his sincerity. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. I want you to stay, he said. Not just as an analyst. As a partner. To help me build this company back into what it was meant to be. It was an offer of a shared future, of a life beyond the one she had ever dared to dream of. And as she looked into his startlingly blue eyes, she knew she was already home. 6 months later, the Vance Industries Tower felt less like an intimidating fortress and more like a home. Elara now led the new Strategic Analysis Division, a department Julian had created specifically for her. Her team was a hand-picked group of unconventional thinkers, coders who were also poets, mathematicians who painted, historians who understood data. She had fostered a culture of looking for the why, for the human story behind the numbers. Her work had already identified and prevented 2 major crises, earning her the unshakable respect of the board and the entire industry. The crippling medical debt that had haunted her for so long was a thing of the past, paid off with her first signing bonus. She had moved out of her tiny apartment and into a beautiful place overlooking a park, but she kept a picture of her mother on her desk, a constant reminder of the values of kindness and integrity that had led her to this new life. Tonight, she wasn't in her own apartment. She was standing with Julian on the private terrace of his penthouse, the entire city spread out at their feet. The wind was gentle, and the sounds of the metropolis below were a distant, muted hum. She was wearing a simple, elegant blue dress, the same color as his eyes. He stood beside her, his arm wrapped gently around her waist, their comfortable silence speaking volumes. They were no longer just boss and employee, or even just partners in business. In the quiet moments away from the boardroom, they had found a deep and profound connection, a romance built not on a whirlwind fantasy, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared values, and genuine admiration. Do you ever miss it? He asked softly, his voice a low rumble against the night air. The quiet life? The invisibility? Elara thought for a moment, looking out at the endless stream of headlights, each one a person with their own story, their own struggles, their own hidden gifts. I don't miss being invisible, she said. But I try to remember what it felt like. It reminds me to see the people that others look through. Julian tightened his hold, pulling her closer. That's why I need you, he whispered. You're my true north. You always see what's real. He turned her to face him, his expression serious, tender. I love you, Elara, I love you, Julian, she replied, her heart full. The words felt as natural and as true as everything else that had passed between them. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss that was both a promise and a culmination of their incredible journey. It was a testament to the fact that the most unlikely of paths can lead to the most beautiful destinations. So, let me ask you again, what is the true measure of a person's worth? Is it found in the noise of success, or in the quiet integrity of a single, selfless act? This story reminds us that beneath the surface of our ordinary lives, we all have an extraordinary capacity for courage and kindness. The world may try to label you, to put you in a box, to render you invisible. But your true value is not determined by their perception, it is determined by your actions when no one is watching. What hidden gifts are you holding inside? And what would happen if you had the courage to use them? Share this story if it moved you, and tell us in the comments below about a time when a small act of kindness made a big difference in your life. Because you never know when you might be entertaining angels, or a billionaire's mother unawares. Your single act could be the ripple that changes everything.